evening. Welcome to VoiceWorks. My name is Sue Cooper, and I'm here again this evening along with Peter Stewart to talk to you about voice technology. And we're still speaking about one of the meetups that we went to earlier this week. This is a continuation from what we were chatting about yesterday when we spoke about Andrea Mattoni from Alexa, who was speaking at the UX Crunch meetup on Wednesday night. Was it Wednesday night, Peter?
It was Tuesday night.
Was it Tuesday? I've lost the day.
Hello, welcome to the show, and it's going to be another short one because we know that you have important things to do, and we also know that you've got a choice. So thanks for choosing us as your one of your words on voice. So tonight we're going to be talking about what Ben Sawyer had to say. Now, Ben is from Babylon Health, and he had some really interesting quotes and also some terrific links as well that he shared with us. But essentially, he wasn't talking so much about what Babylon Health were doing, what their skills and things were out there, although obviously he did make mention of that. What he was specifically talking about was more of a kind of general overview about voice skill creation, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this was really some kind of really good tips and pointers for anyone wanting to get into voice tech and who's thinking of creating a skill or a flash briefing or using conversational techniques in some way to design a skill or an action. Some really kind of gold nuggets of information from someone that has been working in this industry for a few years now. So as Peter says, there were some really good takeaways, and I am going to look at my notes because some of them were so good that I wrote them down as direct quotes because they were just brilliant. I mean, he started off by saying that the industry as a whole we haven't found our metaphors yet. We don't know what to call things just yet, which I thought was fascinating, considering the more I delve into voice tech, the more language is so central to what we're doing. And he's right, the vocabulary isn't there yet because this industry is just so new and is just on the verge of kind of becoming kind of taken up by everybody in everyday life. He said that voice is the most error-prone form of input. Now, I know, Peter, this was something that you were really kind of taken to, this kind of idea that, it's one of those forms where actually it is quite error prone, but also we're not very forgiving of it. We're not very patient with it. We expect that this human-like voice, this conversational interaction will actually understand us and will therefore output what it is that we are requiring from it. So yeah, voice is the most error prone tech, and for those exact reasons that Peter's put up on the screen there, because of noise, diversity, accents and different demands. So yeah, a really interesting point, and a great way to start what was essentially quite a positive evening about voice tech, but to start it with this kind of broad criticism, really, Peter, wasn't it?
Yeah, indeed. And also what was interesting is that he didn't hold back. He was very polite, but also he did make several mentions about where where Amazon skills were failing, and also some circumstances where he thought maybe Amazon themselves were failing when it comes to voice. And he said the reality is that conversation will be a long time coming. Currently, very short, basic interactions, and that actually was the kind of conversation that I followed up with a few people after Tuesday night's event. But essentially, yeah, we're really still in the very, very low foothills of about conversation, about voice design. So even though yesterday we were talking about conversational design and so on, Ben was saying that real conversations where we can just throw anything, whether it be at a smart speaker or a fridge or a wall clock or whatever it happens to be, is still a very long way off. He gave us quite a few pointers about some of the things that we need to be thinking about when we are designing, whether it be a skill or an action or anything else regarding some voice tech. And some of this may sound as kind of basic stuff, but you know what? Susan and I are here because we're wanting to talk about real kind of basic stuff, because what we've identified is that there is quite a leap in learning that people have to make when they go to some of these conferences or they read books and articles and websites and so on, that a lot of them are kind of right up there, whereas a lot of people's understanding is I don't even know what a skill is. And, that's what we're here to try and help you with, to try and navigate and give you some kind of route map to how to get from A to B. So how to design. A basic point was that if you're going to be creating a voice skill, spend time in your call center. Find out what it is that those frequently asked questions really are, that people want to know the answers to, and they're asking you to help them with. Ask your users, go out, see how they're using your brand, your product, your bit of machinery, whatever it is, in situ. Do some actual tests with them, whether it be in the workplace or the home or on the street. Do some real good old-fashioned hands-on research. And I know, Suze, that this is something that I think you did exclaim actually in the meeting. Yes, about those FAQs, because very often FAQs are things that people kind of dump onto a page by themselves, but they're never frequently asked questions, are they?
That's right. I think, the FAQ page, and this is a conversation we've had this week with some others in the voice space, the FAQ page on your website really is something from way back when. In fact, most people have superseded the FAQ page with an about page or, actual kind of proper paragraph prose written, proper description to answer those questions without having to actually spell them out, as it were. But voice search is such that Google will be crawling for those long tail keywords, for those actual questions that we're putting into our Google Assistant, into our Alexa devices. You have to remember that, yes, we use our speech, but the tech behind it then translates that, turns that into text. That's how it crawls. That's what it's looking for and searching through before it then turns it back into speech, reads it out back via the speaker. So, in order to be able to answer these questions, the easiest way at the moment to optimize for voice search is to add that FAQ page back onto your website. And I say back onto it because, as I say, I think most people have moved off beyond the FAQ page. That's something from the early 90s, really, when everyone had a website and wasn't quite sure what to put on it. So kind of FAQs was sort of the main thing. It seems like at the moment, the technology for voice is such that it kind of needs that simplicity back again. I'm sure it won't be long before it can crawl a very standard page and find exactly what it's looking for without that. But for now, that's kind of the starting point of it. But the other thing that I think was really interesting that he spoke about was that if you're designing for voice, make sure that's what you're doing. He said lots of people are saying that he's hearing people say, oh, we'll just use the chatbot that we've got and we'll use that for Alexa. Now, a chatbot conversation might be a good starting point for you, but it is all about translating that into how it would be used with voice. And the way that you might say something is very different to the way that you might type it. Again, it's back to that kind of similar idea of voice search in that the way we say something might not be the same as the way that we type it into the Google search. The idea that people are just kind of considering that they can take that chatbot flow and just use it as is on a voice device. He kind of that was a massive no-no, and I think that is something that people will need to kind of realize. He was talking about talking it out loud when you design a conversation, speaking it out loud, lots and lots about testing it out with people that aren't necessarily sure what the endpoint is. And I think all of that is just such good practice.
Absolutely. Some of these design principles are kind of 101, but you know what? Even in that room, and they said it was the most packed session they'd ever had. And Ben's stuff was really golden stuff for most people there. So go out and actually go to your call center and find out what people want to know. Actually speak to the people that use the product in the situation that they use the product. During your course of the skill building, when you're writing it, read out loud what it is that you are writing. Have a read through testing using only the scripts. So don't ad lib round, but just work specifically with the only thing that you've got, the text that you thought was going to work, and maybe someone else in the room trying to work out why it doesn't work, and making those choices, making those changes after the fact, not live in that situation, because you've got to work out every utterance and every situation whether that is going to work or not. There was also the Wizard of Oz strategy as well, which we'll come to in a few moments' time. But also he was saying, and I found this really interesting, talk to people. Again, it kind of goes back to what he was saying earlier on and what we said a few moments ago. Talk to people in real life situations because, quote, if you're not having conversations, you're probably not creating good conversations. But Sue, so much of this is down to, well, perhaps what you and I kind of recognize, know, understand from our life, from our careers in broadcasting, in radio, about the tonality of a real human voice and what is said, and also how something is said. And that's all to do with pitch and pace and pause and tonality, whether it's a male or a female, perhaps how old that person sounds. The qualities, some of those qualities you can train to someone to have, but a lot of them you can't because of the actual larynx, the actual voice box that they've got. So choosing the right person as well to deliver your message. The tone of voice nowadays means much more than the actual tone of voice, because you've got to make sure that the voice you choose and how you make it work fits in with the tone of your brand. But Suze, let's click our ruby slippers, go off to the land of Oz, and tell us about the wizard that intrigued a few people during Ben's session.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm not sure I've completely grasped this concept, Peter. The Wizard of Oz testing. There was, he spoke a little bit about it, and there were lots of nods in the room from the UX guys. So clearly it was something, it was kind of something that they recognized. I'm not kind of on the technical side of it or designing at the moment. So it wasn't something that was familiar to me. The only thing that I've got written down on my extensive notes, which are beautiful, so I was paying attention, but the only thing I have written here is messy human input and the response of the system. So I don't know if perhaps you might be best to explore that a little bit more, Peter.
Yeah, so if you remember that scene near the end of the movie The Wizard of Oz, where throughout the whole of the film, Dorothy and her pals, who were, come on, tell me, Suze, who were her pals? We got the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion. Thanks very much. And Toto the dog. Don't forget Toto the dog as well.
I can't stand the Wizard of Oz.
As well as the Munchkins and so on. That everything is controlled by the Grand Wizard who knows everything and is all-seeing and They, of course, get to the Emerald City. I'm surprising myself with how much I'm remembering here about.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen it all the way through, so maybe that's why it didn't really mean anything to me.
You got scared off by the Wicked Witch of the West and the monkeys in the castle. That was what it was.
I saw the legs under the house.
And it's not until they get to the Emerald City and Toto pulls back that curtain and they realise that the Wizard of Oz is not really a wizard. It's just an ordinary man pulling handles and pressing buttons and levers and all the rest of it. So the Wizard of Oz testing is when you get consumers in a situation and they believe that they are working with and replying to and asking questions of an autonomous machine. However, what they don't realize is that there's a human being the other side of this who is perhaps changing some of the answers to kind of force the situation in a certain way or to test out what it is that a human would say under certain situations. And we had an experiment, didn't we, Suze?
Yes,
where
we did have
someone
the experiment.
was taken from the audience and we put this to the test. And I suppose in a way it worked really well, this test. Or maybe it didn't. It was very, very short. What happened?
So, this guy was plucked from the audience and was invited to give an iteration to Alexa as he would do to ask for something, which he did. And Ben then read out the response and it went back to the guy. And he almost immediately changed slightly what he was asking, but repeated his question, which was not what Ben was expecting at all. And by which stage he'd then moved down further within his conversation, and actually his tech wasn't able to answer the guy's question. So what had happened there was that the error path, we spoke about this a little bit yesterday, he obviously hadn't linked that back through to be able to start again at that stage, and yet that was what the guy was asking in real time in front of everybody. So it did raise a few giggles, but I think it also highlighted a really interesting point in a really real way. Stood there right in front of everybody. It was very quick-witted of the guy to think of it, I think.
Absolutely. So the bot was about booking a meeting room, and so the bot asked, "How long is your meeting going to be?" And expecting the answer to be in increments of an hour. But when the MOTP, when the member of the public said 15 minutes, that is where the whole conversation began and end, because the bot wasn't able to process that and hadn't made it clear from the outset what kind of minutage or duration options were available at the time. We'll crack on. We're near the end of what Ben was saying, and I think he was probably talking for about half an hour or so. But as you can imagine, this was really powerful, what he was saying and how he was saying it. Ironically, the next point was be brief. Don't overwhelm the user. Also talking about, well, kind of what we went back to talking about a couple of 3 minutes ago with Suze about our background in voice, in presentation, in radio, in scripting, and that kind of thing. The one breath test. Can the iteration be said within one breath? Essentially, is that short? Is it just one sentence? Because otherwise, if it doesn't succeed in the one breath test, it's too long, and that means there's too much information. People are going to get confused. Also, well, we've talked about the Wizard of Oz testing. Also, we heard about the Goldilocks zone as well. So let's see whether Suze knows much about her nursery rhymes, or a little bit more about nursery rhymes than she does about MGM musicals. Take it away. What's the Goldilocks zone? So
yeah, I absolutely loved how what Ben was saying really resonated with me in my radio life, as you were saying, and this similarly did. I did understand the Goldilocks reference. So this was finding the Goldilocks zone. This is not giving too much, but also not giving too little. And I think, certainly in radio, when I'm sat there, I've got 3 sentences with which to tell a whole story within a bulletin. And, there's no room for too much, but you also have to make sure that you get as much in there as possible. So you don't want to miss anything out. So there's no room for too little either. And I think that is exactly right, that in the case where you're creating this conversational dialogue, that you have to make sure that at each stage, not only are you not asking too much of the response, but also that you're not giving too much information in terms of the way that the conversation is designed.
Absolutely, and laying out your part of that particular utterance in the correct order. So actionable or new information at the end, so that's not having to be held on by the human being about, they've got to remember something and then discount something else that they're told and then try and remember what it is they've got to do. So basic information or old information first, and then new information or confusing or potentially confusing information, partly because it's new, at the end of that. And again, read out loud. How does it sound? That is, the most important thing when we're coming to voice and we're coming to the end. So let's talk about the end of Ben's presentation when he was talking about, and I love this could be a motto for my life: fail gracefully. If you're going to do anything at all, then, put up a good fight. And then at the end, you know what I mean. So, and again, I love this quote. There were so many little scribbles that I was making, and one of these other quotes, which I particularly liked, was "Spend more time on your error path than a happy path." Because I guess what he was saying is that if people are enjoying it and if it seems to be working pretty well, then, you don't need to spend too much time on kind of upping that kind of percentage rate. It's already working well, so don't keep polishing it and polishing it and polishing. Spend more time on the bits that aren't potentially working very well, or working out which bits could fall down completely. Because if somebody goes through that conversation and is trying to get something, whether it be information from the conversation or trying to buy something, and it doesn't work and it fails, and there's a kind of a bad response, or the whole thing just stops completely and there's no response at all, you're going to go back? Are you going to try a second time? Hold on, I've wasted 2 or 3 minutes. I haven't got where I was. Why do they keep saying that voice is easier than an app? I could have bought this on an app 10 minutes ago. I'm not going to go here ever again. It's a bad user experience, isn't it, Suze?
It is, and you know, I think this brings us full circle really, in terms of our first point was that Ben said that this is the most error-prone input. Really, it's the tech at the moment. So in terms of that, if you take that into consideration, that at the moment it isn't really a seamless tech to use, then it's only right that you make sure that if it is going to fall down, and if there are going to be errors, which you know there will be, that you make sure that path does actually leave the user still satisfied in some way, and at least not stuck in some kind of repetitive loop, which, as you say, will just get really frustrating and probably just turn them off completely to that skill, if not the use of voice tech, you know, further afield as well. So yeah, it was a brilliant evening, and I know we've still got an awful lot more to speak about. I think we're going to pick up a bit more about it next week. I think tomorrow night's going to be Flash Briefing Friday. Is that right, Peter?
Absolutely. We'll leave you with another quote there from Ben. When will it becoming annoying to a consumer that they can't connect to a brand with voice? Yes, and that's what it's all about, really, isn't it? What we're talking about here on VoiceWorks, and also some of the other places that you may be able to hear discussions and conversations and round tables and rants all about this particular new and emerging space. So that's right. Tomorrow night is Flash Briefing Friday. So on a Friday, when we're on, we always try and bring you information about flash briefings, what to do, how to design one, what kind of content to use, maybe some of the technical bits beside it, also as well as your skill base, also a little bit about your mental space as well, about the thought process that goes into it, because it really is something that you've got to consider the time and the effort that you're going to be putting into it. So talking about how you kind of prepare to do a flash briefing, potentially 365 of those every single year, and that amounts to pretty much one every day.
That's right. I think, you know, as you say, it does take a lot of commitment, and I hope that with that, through our Flash Briefing Fridays, we can kind of introduce people to exactly what it takes to get this done, and to get it done well. So yeah, and as well as our Flash Briefing Friday, we're also working on our presentations, aren't we, Peter? We'll be speaking at Amazon UK in London on July the 16th. We've mentioned this a few times now, but we do have some tickets left. They are free, but we do need you to sign up just for security and numbers. And that will be an evening all about an introduction to voice technology. So we're not just focusing on Alexa, we're not just focusing on Google Assistant, we'll be looking at the whole lot, Siri, Bixby, the whole kit and caboodle. And it really is an introduction. As Peter said, there are an awful lot of meetups that are going on at the moment that we're attending. And even as people that are really interested in the space, some of it is kind of flying over our heads. Some of it's a bit too techie, some of it's a bit too codey, some of it's got an awful lot of assumed knowledge. Well, you can rest assured that at our event, this will really be from the ground up. We're not going to baffle or bamboozle you, and we want your questions and your input. We want it to be a kind of community event where everybody takes away what they can about voice technology. So I'll post a link to that after this episode in the comments. So do sign up and come along. It will be July the 16th at Amazon UK. We're really looking forward to seeing you there.
And if you're listening to this as a podcast, then go to Eventbrite and you need to search for the location of London and also put in Voice First and the event should come up. Or as Sue says, you can search by the date as well. And we've got a few surprises up our sleeves as well. You may be walking out not only with more knowledge than you went in with, but also maybe a gift or two as well. So we've got a few surprises to tempt and tease you with. And we may tell you about some of those next week as well. So if you're not techie, maybe you're more of the branding, maybe more of the marketing, PR, communication side and presentation side, ideas side, creative side. And you're thinking, you know what? There's nothing in this voice space for me at the moment because people keep talking about codes and about the tech stuff and lines and all sorts of complicated stuff. I want to know how I can use it to extend my brand and maybe to sell more stuff. Then this is the kind of presentation that you need to be coming to. Okay, that's it. I'll be back tomorrow, hopefully with Suze, but maybe not. She's got other things that she needs to get done and dusted. She has a life to live, and she's going to a conference tomorrow, in fact. But I'll certainly be here with Flash Briefing Friday, and we'll be back together again, I'm sure, next week as well for another episode of VoiceWorks. Suze, thanks for that. And if you're watching or whether you're listening, thanks for the loan of your eyes and your ears.